Hello, everyone. Very warm welcome to all of you. So, today I'm going to start something very different and very exciting. You guys might have been watching my videos, and I keep repeating this. I don't come from a musical background, but I do make reaction videos for so many songs and music videos. And today we have someone who comes from a musical background and knows a lot about music technically. So, Janapriyan, welcome. And let me just quickly mention a bit about you and your background. So, Janapriyan Levin is a California based music producer who has worked on music extensively. He has worked with so many playback singers and musicians from all over India and has produced so many songs. He has a wonderful YouTube channel. I'll share the link to that as well. So you can go and check out his songs there as well. So, a very warm welcome, Janapriyan. And how are you doing today?
Thank you for having me, Rahul. It's great to be here. And I'm coming to you from California, and it's a lovely morning here. And I can't wait to get into this.
So I discovered Janapriyan on Instagram. So I was following his Instagram account, and one day he just happened to go live, and I just happened to have a conversation with him over that Instagram live, and that's how we got in touch. And since then, I've been bugging him with my queries and questions about music, and he's been very kind to give me detailed replies and book recommendations and so much. So today, what we are going to talk about is something to do with pop music, which a lot of people don't take very seriously, is what I would put it as. So, Britney Spears is an artist who different people would have different opinions about. One of her songs, Toxic, is a song which I have heard so many times. And recently I came across a video. It was a video essay which kind of explained what were the inspirations for the song and how they twisted and turned certain sources and came up with this wonderful song. So I had just to cross check what they were saying, I would want to have Janapriyan's thoughts and ideas on that one video essay as well. So that's what we are going to be looking at today. Janapriyan, before we start, anything you would like to mention, say, or orient us with?
No, I think you did a great job. It's basically this video is they are explaining how Bollywood gave Britney Spears Toxic, how the production of Toxic is based on some samples from a Bollywood hit. Tere Meri Beech Mein, is it from 80s?
From this film called Ek Duje Ke Liye. That song is very much a part of my childhood as well. Okay, without giving any spoilers or explaining it any further, let's just start watching that video and we'll just.
Okay, let's get into it. Okay, let me get into share screen.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
Rewind to 2003. Britney Spears hasn't had a big hit in almost 4 years, and critics say her career is slumping. This all would change when she dropped her song Toxic. The real story behind Toxic begins in 1981 in India with a blockbuster Bollywood musical. Those high-pitched strings in the score, you've heard them before. At the opening of Toxic, then repeated throughout the song. It's this musical number, Tiri Meri Beech Mein, that's the source of Toxic's unmistakable hook and riff, and a lot of the song's intensity.
Teri Meri Beech Mein, it's from a classic film called Ek Duje Ke Liye.
This is Manasi Prasad, a classical Carnatic vocalist with an
Okay, I'm gonna ek duje ke liye. My Hindi, I'm seekh rahi hai. I'm always learning. So ek ke liye is one. It's give me one of something. So I don't know what duje means. Am I right? Oh no, ke liye is from something.
It's basically like ek duje ke liye, they're meant for each other. That's what it means.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, see, I wouldn't have gotten that from the picking out each word. Okay, back to the video.
Tere Mere Beech Mein is the thing between you and me.
Right.
That's the song title.
Encyclopedic knowledge of Indian music.
This song is actually based on an Indian classical raga or melody.
Okay, so actually what she doesn't mention is the name of the raga, and it's Shivaranjani.
There's so many songs on this raga.
So Shivaranjani is, yeah, I would say it's popular in India. Yeah. And my understanding is that Shivaranjani has a lot of intense emotion, but it's largely the emotion of longing. And so therefore, when there's a scene in a movie or a play, or even if you write a shabad or a bhajan or some feel, even a devotional thing that is a sense of pining or longing for one's beloved, whether it's your actual lover or spiritual in nature, that you could lean into this raga for the melody, and that will give you the feeling. So anyway, so that's Shivaranjani, and let's get back into it, and I'll say more about that later.
It's la 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 la. So you find a lot of other Indian songs which are in this raga. It used to convey feelings of very intense emotions. I think one of the reasons why Bollywood songs work so well is the range or the pitch of the songs tends to be really high, and it brings an intensity and a brightness.
Britney's team of songwriters, led by hitmaker Kathy Dennis, took two tiny sections of the musical number and expertly merged those two sections together.
There's a string hook that's got the low fast part, which is the bump bump ba-da-da-dum, ba-da-da-dum, and then there's a very high keening part that goes ba-da-ba.
This is Adam Ragusia, a writer and YouTuber who's also a classically trained composer. That second part of the hook that Adam just sang, it starts on a super high F sharp, a note that lies far outside the song's key of C minor, making the whole thing sound disorienting.
That screaming F sharp note makes the whole thing sound cinematic and scary in a fun way, like it.
Okay, stop the share here, and here's what my perspective on this thing is. Different people can find different things interesting about this, but what I am drawn to in this conversation is how non-Indian folks, Western folks, the people who made this video, this guy who's talking, and the woman who's narrating, who did a great job, they describe that as disorienting. He said scary. I believe he said if it's scary, right, or spooky even. And so there is a cultural way that people listen, right? There's a cultural familiarity with certain sounds and scales and melodies and things like that. And so, for example, to the Western ear, unfamiliar with Indian music, Shivaranjani, this scale, at first feels spooky. So spooky, indeed, that the only time you really come across those intervals, which it's a minor scale with the natural sixth, okay, which we don't get into something so technical, but the only time you really come across that is in like Tim Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas, or like spooky flavored music, right? Also in gypsy jazz, you find those intervals. Sa re ga pa da sa pa ga re sa. It's very people are going to hear it differently, right? Like when you think about Balinese gamelan music, Balinese gamelan music is it's like the cultural music of people from Bali, and it's hitting these kind of metal bowls with. I know nothing about that culture. I'm just giving an example of, like, to most folks outside of Bali, it's a very it's the sound of things hitting metal bowls. It's not necessarily pleasant in the sound, right? But for the people of Bali, it has a completely different significance. Does it make sense what I'm saying? Culturally, Indian listeners are poised to hear Shivaranjani as the sound of longing, but Westerners don't necessarily hear longing in that scale. We hear something spooky, right? Until you get familiar with it, until you have an association with it, is really what it comes down to.
But so now that you're mentioning that and looking at all the other songs that they kind of mentioned, which are based on this raga, those when I hear and when I've heard them since I was a kid, they definitely bring the idea of longing. But this film, you should watch this film sometime. It's quite a well-made film. So they start with this whole setups of ruins by the seaside, you know, and it's a very scary kind of a introduction when the movie starts. And I have a feeling, listening to you, I have a feeling that maybe they picked up this song and used this whole treatment because they understood that the Western people are going to look at it this way and the Indian people are going to look at it this way. So let's bring both these things together and let's try to create something. I'm getting a feeling that this might have been what happened.
That could very well be. Now I'm very curious about that, about the music.
And also, Janpriyan, I wanted to ask that. When they were playing, you know, the bit from the Hindi film, and then they were playing the bit used in the song "Toxic," there was slight variation that I could identify. Like it wasn't exactly it wasn't the identical exact replication or replaying of that thing. So what brings to my mind is it something which they did which had a similarity here, and then this whole music video as essay video came up, or were they consciously involved? Because do we have this? I'm not too sure how authentic a source it is, because this is someone stating that, you know, these people came up with this thing and they tweeted that.
Well, definitely it is that sample. And there's a great website called whosampled.com. Okay. And you can go and type in the title of the track, and the track will give you all of the samples that were lifted from other songs, right? And then links back to those, and it gives you the timestamp. Really cool. Whosampled.com. And you know, sampling is popular in hip hop, was definitely a major part of hip hop in the, you know, I'd say from the 80s all through the 90s and even now. And so we can just look up the Britney Spears track and just see if they credit the source. At that level, obviously, those the license for those things are, you know, they're bought and sold all the time. So I'm sure that they did it legitimately and paid the publisher for the rights to use those samples. And when you mention that they're not exactly the same, what you can do, the technology is very easy. It's just kind of a cut and paste job. So you kind of lift that sample, you know, and then you can tweak it a little bit and move things around a little bit and pitch things up and down. So the producer grabbed the string piece and then he tweaked it just enough and then, you know, warmed it up and, you know, so, but it's definitely from this track.
Okay.
Okay, let's get back to
Action film.
There's definitely something that sounds dangerous in that string sample. This has a lot to do with the film it was lifted from. A Tale of
So that's just to my point exactly, you know, she's saying it sounds dangerous, you know, and so the question really becomes is there a way that we listen that is universal? And in my experience, I would say no, that the act of listening is very individual. It can be cultural, but it's ultimately individual because right? Does it sound, I don't know if it sounds dangerous. Someone's going to hear longing. Someone's going to feel, like a spy movie, like a bank robbery, you know, something spooky. It's very interesting how we hear those differences. Okay, I'll shut up and get back to the thing.
forbidden romance.
It was a story about these star-crossed lovers. They fell in love and it was opposed by their families. So both of them ended up dying at the end of the movie. So it's kind of a really tragic, intense love story.
Massive spoiler there.
Say what?
I just said she gave a massive spoiler there that both of them die in the end.
Reflected in the music, especially in the glissandos, these sliding figures in the strings, which are pretty much the signature of Toxic sampled hook. They sound slippery and precarious, which fits since Britney's singing about slipping under and falling. Somehow, these notes sound even more treacherous when the sample's played backwards halfway through the track.
Now that is spooky.
Screechy orchestral part.
You feel that that's spooky.
I felt that was spooky.
Yeah, there's something about the reverse thing. There's something kind of like a malfunctioning robot flavored. It's unknown where the source of it is when you play it backward. It definitely has an uncomfortable ghostly kind of vibe.
So I did that probably just once, and I just tried to play a record backwards because it gives me that option that I can play it in reverse. It was so scary, and it was so, I don't know. I just did that once, and I never did that again. And I don't know, someone was just making it up or something, but there were some people at one point of time, he used to say that if you play Madonna's songs in reverse, I don't know which one they were mentioning, it was a prayer to the devil, and it was devil worshipping and stuff like that.
That was a big thing in the 80s, the mid and late 80s, and with hair metal. If you remember bands like Warrant, Poison, we're throwing it way back, but Motley Crue, that was a big thing with the Dr. Feelgood. That was the metal that was around when I was like a very small child, and that was a thing. If you play it backwards, the devil's going to tell you to do things, and it's nonsense. But we'll let the viewers decide for themselves.
Yeah.
It's borrowed from Bollywood. The other big source of danger in Toxic comes from the buzzing, ominous sounding guitar. If that guitar bit sounds kind of old school to you, that's because it's surf, a rock subgenre that was biggest in the late 50s and early 60s, when there was a boom of interest in West Coast wave culture. Surf guitar is played in a way that conjures up the sounds and feel of surfing, with a hard and fast picking style and loud, wet-sounding reverb. If surf's supposed to capture the carefree California ethos, you might be wondering why the guitar in Toxic has very much the opposite feel. That deep, low guitar tone sounds suspenseful, in a way that matches the adrenaline rush of the Bollywood strings. That's probably because you identify that twangy guitar with something else entirely, one of the most recognizable movie themes in the world. The first ever Bond film, Dr. No, came out in 1962, right in surf rock's heyday, so it's not surprising that its title song, which would set the template for all later Bond themes, was fueled by surf. The 007 theme had an outsized influence on the music of all the Cold War spy films and TV series that followed it. By now, the tone of guitar that you hear in Toxic has big spy connotations, and the song's Bond-inspired music video seems to be a nod to this connection. Okay, so we've got the aggressive twang of the surf guitar, evoking the reckless daring of a special agent, and frantically sliding Bollywood strings capturing the rush of a risky love affair. How is it that these two disparate sounds from opposite sides of the globe seem to have such an affinity for each other? Turns out they share some of the same musical DNA. Monty Norman, the film composer who penned the 007 theme, lifted its melody from a previous piece he'd written for a play adaptation of A House for Mr. Biswas, V.S. Nepal's novel about Indian immigrants.
Okay, so this is the place where, I love these kind of videos, making these wild connections and getting, kind of a quick history. This is the place I do feel that I would want to not verify the sources to kind of disprove something, but I am curious about some of those connections a little further, that the same composer who did A House for Mr. Biswas also did the 007 theme song. That's pretty significant.
Mm-hmm.
And then in just a moment, we're about to hear the original riff too. So it's the same phrasing but different intervals. But the motif, same idea. Later we'll hear Bond. You can see the similarity. You can see how Bond is an evolution of that original idea. And also, you hear it in things like Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov's Song of India. There's so many places, even in heavy metal, actually, Metallica bases a lot of their riffs on the flat second, which is Komal Ray, in the Indian scale. And it is kind of almost the instantly identifiable Indian sound, to be, not that we ever want to oversimplify a cultural music, but there's kind of, if you had to boil down the cultural identity in a musical soundbite, right? The flat second would be kind of instantly Indian. For example, if it was your job to compose the music for a movie with a Chinese character who's robbing a bank, and it's kind of a funny bank heist thing, and they walk into this magical Chinese restaurant in downtown New York City, and there's incense and jade cats with the good luck arm and all of that, and all of the flavors of that vibe. And it was your job to give us, okay, we need one sound, a 1 or 2 second sound that's going to instantly transport the audience to China, the Westerners' idea of China, right? Because all this stuff we're talking about is like a very Eurocentric, white-centric perspective. And so it would be, what I would do is I would do a glissando on a Chinese guzheng, the Chinese harp. There's a certain combination of notes on that instrument, and it immediately sounds to most folks as Chinese, right? Because it is. Not that we, of course, want to oversimplify anybody's music, but the flat second sa re is kind of what we think of as Indian. Oh, it sounds Indian, right? And so the Bond riff has that close interval. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand. And interestingly, I don't have that much of, I don't know, I'm so musically untrained that for me, not oversimplifying any cultural music, but it's the musical instrument that will take me to that country or culture.
Oh, true.
So,
That's also a good point.
so for me, sitar is inherently Indian, and similarly, so many other instruments will kind of take me to that. But what I understand from what you are saying is that not only that instrument, but certain musical notes and arrangements will even amplify that whole idea.
Right. That's a very good point. And yeah, I mean, sure, when you hear the sarangi also, or the dilruba, you're instantly transported.
Yeah.
And this, even in, when we talk about the electric guitar, like we're talking about surf rock, for example, it's not just the electric guitars, which can sound so different in different environments, but it's the tremolo effect, the reverb effect, the tremolo picking, and it's stylistically how you play the guitar that makes it sound like surf rock, right? So that was new to me when I watched this video.
But it's interesting because
that particular.
because so if I start talking about musical instruments, we have the violin and we have the South Indian style of playing that instrument, which is so distinctly just South Indian. And when it might, the instrument might remind me of the Western music, but there's one variation of that very instrument which takes me down south as well. What are we calling it? Wave?
Surf rock?
Surf rock. So they showed that poster in which that guy was on the surfboard, on the waves, and he was holding an electric guitar. I was like, so what does it mean? How am I supposed to process that? Anyway.
But I'm curious if that sound, when I listened to the old Bollywood music, and I actually came across a great YouTube channel that had all this old Tamil film song music. I'll share the link with you, but it was so amazing, and the music was so well composed. It was the way that it was composed is everyone was, recorded in one room at a time. And I'm always surprised to see how many Western influences were embedded in the music at that time. We're talking, I don't know, 60s, maybe even earlier. Do you remember as a young man, like, was that surf rock sound, was that ever a sound that made its way into the local regional music that you grew up with?
Local regional music, I'm not too sure, but Bollywood music definitely is. There are so many movies
Right. Okay.
from the 60s and the early 80s which have that sound. So many.
Right. Yeah. Right. Okay. Right. Okay. Let's get back to it.
Basically, the sound that has come to define spy music was in fact born of Indian music.
And so when we hear those two aesthetics put together in Toxic, it feels really natural to us.
Toxic distills some of the most thrilling sounds of global cinema into a 3-minute pop masterpiece. What other club banger combines Bond and Bollywood so perfectly and remains a DJ staple 15 years on? That is why Toxic is not only the greatest triumph of Britney's career, but one of the most impressive pop hits of our time.
Oh, that's it. Okay.
That's it. Yeah. So what do you think?
So I somehow, in the recent years, I would that would be like some 10 years or so. I began to. I'm so sorry to say this, but I began to have a very low opinion of pop music, and it was just after watching this video that I felt no, it's unfair to label it like that. Not all pop music is that unthought, or it's not that shallow in terms of its concept and the amount of work that goes in. So I was very pleasantly surprised, and then I also felt that why do I not like all like when it comes to Britney Spears, I remember Hit Me Baby One More Time, I remember Toxic, and there was one more song, Oops I Did It Again, which I liked. And Oops I Did It Again because of Titanic came out, and they made that silly joke about the old lady throwing that thing at the bottom of the ocean, and then they're going on Mars, and it's like it's so cheesy, and it's so I don't know. I did not probably like it for its musicality, but I liked it for the story treatment that it was pushing, and the whole jokes that it was trying to make. Then another song which I liked by Britney Spears was the song called Lucky, in which she's singing about this one actress and she's so lucky, and but she seems to be leading a miserable life and all of that. That was so. These are the 4 songs which I remember enjoying from by Britney Spears. And Toxic, I was not really like, I say I know why I like Hit Me Baby One More Time, I know why I like Oops I Did It Again, I know why I like Lucky, but I never knew why I like Toxic. And it was only after watching this video that I maybe I got a clue. Okay, so that's what's working for me, and that's why I enjoy this song so much. And obviously, when it comes to Bollywood music, I will not dispute the statement that most of the Bollywood music is copied from the West, and it's just those tunes with original lyrics. And so sad the current situation is that even that doesn't happen anymore, because they have stopped writing good lyrics as well. There's such bad lyrics today, so Bollywood music is kind of like
Okay, so, but I have to defend Bollywood music to an extent, and I know, like, I'm Pretty Woman comes to mind, and there's so many things even in the films itself, like where the film itself is copying the Western film. Yeah, you don't want to do that too much, right? But there's still so much creativity, and there's so much great music that is so unique and that comes out of India. I sooner would lean into the Indian sound than some of the things coming out of America. But the nature of pop music is to be marketable and to reach the masses, and it's formulaic. Part of that formula is magic. It should be, a pop song should be that predictable formula plus that little piece of magic. I was in the car with my stepdaughter yesterday, and we were listening to Return of Saturn by No Doubt from the 90s. That band, No Doubt, they did Just a Girl, Gwen Stefani, No
Spider
Doubt.
webs.
And so that Spiderwebs. Okay, so yeah, Spiderwebs, Just a Girl, and there was like two others from their first album, or that were earworms, that were well branded, that were great storytelling and great melodies and hooks and great pop format. That sophomore album, the follow-up album that we were listening to, was all of the elements that you would expect. It was easily identifiable as this is No Doubt. The guitar tones, her voice, the drumming, the kind of reggae rhythms, next to the next to the punk grooves. It was all there. All the formula was there, but the magic was not there. So that album didn't really do as well as the previous one. And when people talk about No Doubt, decades later, they talk about those hits, Spiderwebs, Just a Girl, this one and that one, right? But they don't talk about anything from that next album. Even though that album wasn't bad, it simply lacked that magical element, that earworm, that head sticky element, right? So people pursue that. Some artists pursue that formula. They go all in on that formula, like Ed Sheeran. He wrote hundreds of really bad songs for a long time. He says it himself. And then he kind of came upon the formula and started tweaking it. And every time he approaches a song, he's writing from that perspective and trying to write the best, pop song that's going to have the most impact. Beyonce Beyonce, Ed Sheeran, Taylor Swift. These are the hit machines. They know how to turn out hits, and they have, of course, a team and everything else. And so while I don't want to oversimplify it, I do want to point out that it is formulaic. But the formula includes this kind of magical element, and Toxic definitely has it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, so at times I just sit and wonder, why don't I like the music that comes out these days, and why do I always happen to go back to the older music? And a few days back I discovered this wonderful vinyl store online, and I was like that, okay, so let's do some crate digging. So obviously there was no new artist who I would like to listen to, so I started exploring the older artists who I didn't know about, and then I started looking them up. One thing which I felt was that maybe I have a thing for real and natural instruments, and I like the music better when that happens. And when it becomes too much of a techno thing, it doesn't appeal to me. I don't really know, because I do like a lot of synth pop from the 80s and the 90s as well. But I was just thinking about it, and then I was like, maybe there is something about a guitar being played with the strings being plucked, with that whole organic production of that sound, which will have those strange variations, which would not happen when we play it through an electronic device.
There's nothing new under the sun. In terms of intervals from one note to the next, we've discovered all of them. But the presentation of those intervals through an instrument, whether it's a guitar, a piano, a synth, and then of course the vernacular or the vocabulary of a synth, the amount of different color you can get, and how we keep updating the technology, and we're pulling out all these abstract colors out of synths and sequencers and electronic sources. That will be, and ultimately what you're hearing, what's landing on the ear, is timbre. The timbre of the interval, right? To use a lot of technical terms, the color of the instrument, the color of the sound, how it hits the ear, that is the thing that evolves decade to decade. That's the thing timbre is the first thing to hit the ear. So a melody, even a melody that's near, that's what, 2 seconds, right? It takes 2 seconds to hear that melody, to complete that melody before the cycle begins again. But the timbre of the string, the timbre of the sample that's lifted from the vinyl, it's kind of dusty, it's old, it's vintage, it's mysterious, it's crackly, it's a little dirty. That flavor is the first thing that we hear. And so now we live in a world where we're scrolling at the speed of light. And if something pops out and catches our eyeballs long enough that we do this and we allow the sound to hit the ear, it's the timbre that hits, and that's what either we say, nah, I don't like that, or we stick around, because it's no longer the composition. People don't have 4 minutes of spare attention to listen to the overarching development of a composition. Nobody's listening like that. The audience is saying, give me a vibe. I want an instant vibe, right? And so your song, when you present it online, has to have that really imaginative timbre. It's almost an abstraction. It has to be something that reaches out off of the page and grabs you and is interesting. It doesn't have to be good. It has to be interesting. It almost, in a way, has to be annoying. Something that if you were to listen to a lot, it would torture you. And believe it or not, we're drawn to these sounds because they're memorable. They're well branded. Part of the signature, the fingerprint of the song, of the vibe. And I would say, I know there's no TikTok in India, but the psychology of the audience is very, very much what's happening on TikTok is what's happening in the world, which is that if you took all the songs from 2021, 2022 that were popular on TikTok, right? And just put them in an Excel spreadsheet and then did what's common among them and what's different among them, because they're very, very different. You can have very new songs, you can have songs from the 40s. What you would find in common, I believe, the common denominator of all of that music is that the timbre is interesting on each of those tracks. There's something about the color, the overarching color of the song that immediately jumps out of the phone and grabs you. There's no waiting. It's not a composition. No one cares about a composition. There's 7 seconds or 10 seconds of a song that just has a quality that really bites the imagination. And so you have that in Toxic. You have it in so many places, but that's the thing that people are listening for.
Which somehow, like thinking about Toxic, it's probably a song which somehow doesn't get old. It somehow has that, I don't know, maybe because they've mixed something from the past and that present, which is now the past. So it's that whole mix of two different, times, which probably gives it that it's hard to place that in one particular era, because it's actually two past eras.
That's a good point. There is something timeless about it, whereas certain hits, like when I hear Mariah Carey's, Butterfly and all of that's like, it's nostalgia. It brings you back to 1992 or whatever. But I would agree with you about this song. There's something about it that's always good. And what's interesting is if it makes it, well, you wouldn't listen to Toxic at a wedding, but wedding, music that is played at weddings, like what the DJ will play at weddings, that tends to be the timeless stuff. In the US, it's always going to be dance tracks from the 70s. You know what I mean? It's always ABBA. It's I can't think of them all, but even songs like Gangnam Style might be, I think that Gangnam Style was such a hit because it started to approach that place that was like, well, maybe this is going to be one of those timeless things.
Macarena is one. Yeah.
Macarena is another also. Yes, correct. Absolutely. Also, they all lend themselves to these very simple dance moves, right? So the general public can do a dance
Love
move
it.
and they feel
I'm
like
just
they're part
imagining someone playing Toxic on someone's wedding. That's something
of
which
right, right. It's the
that'll be
wrong.
that'll be fun.
So it's interesting to see. It would be interesting experiment to list all of those song titles that show up in weddings in America versus what shows up in dance parties at the weddings in India, and see what is kind of common between them. What does it really take to make a song that is timeless?
Janpriyan, mentioning TikTok, and then here we have Instagram Reels. So here Instagram Reels kind of works like what TikTok does the world over, which has helped so many artists from the past resurface in so many unexpected ways. And for me, one of the most surprising and unexpected revival was ABBA. Because when I was a kid, there was limited kind of musical exposure I had, and irrespective of how good or bad it might be, you listen to it as a kid and it becomes a part of your childhood and you grow a fondness for that. So ABBA for me was that. And then when I grew up, I understood it's not the most respected music band ever, not most of my friends would not enjoy it or like it or want to talk about it, and then so on and so forth. And recently they came out with their new album, and then suddenly they got these two films which didn't really do magic for them, because they came and they went. They never really got them back to the music scene. But after their new album and so many revivals on TikTok and Instagram, the younger kids from 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds, teenagers, they are really getting their music once again. And it just makes me so curious that when I keep saying that there is nothing to listen to in the music that we get these days, most of the music, not all, there's nothing, as you said, that it's just it's the vibe and there's hardly anything beyond that. So it's just something that you might want to play in the background, but nothing that you want to sit and listen to. But when you go pick up music from the 70s, somewhat 80s and 60s, those are the songs you would want to sit and listen and pay attention to what's happening. Maybe the TikTok and Instagram Reels, they're kind of helping the younger generation discover what the layers of music actually are to experience.
I hear both a positivity and also the kind of the grumpy old man which is embedded in all of that, and I think we're probably the same age. There does come a time when one says, I don't like the music of today, I want my, only my thing. And I find myself, in that flavor pretty frequently. But I think, you to your point about how you feel like you want to sit and listen to those songs from the 80s, and how you can relate to the music of this time. There is actually a science around that. In terms of the brain is the most open for new music and identifying with music when human beings are, between 10 and 25 years old, something in that space. And so the music that you experience as a teenager, that's what you identify with. That's what's helping you shape your identity. And then you can listen and enjoy new music as you age, but the things that you grew up on will always be with you. Like, for example, even I was listening to a band, Primus. Okay, that was a band I listened to as a kid. They were a 3-piece band. They did a lot of different unique things. And I listened to one of their albums recently, and I hadn't heard it in 20 years, right? I knew every single word on the album. I haven't thought about the lyrics of those songs in 20 years, but as soon as I heard them, all of that came, that memory was right there. Don't ask me where my car keys are. Don't ask me where I left my, my actual short-term memory is not there. But 20 years back, those lyrics came right away. So there's something to that. When I used to play at these senior nursing homes and go and play music for the old folks there, what they really want is the music that that was popular in the 40s or the 50s when they were kids, these jazz standards. And if you play them something from today's time, they won't know what you're doing, what relevance it has. But if you play those songs that they grew up with, those original recordings, they light up. They want to dance, and it brings back memories as well. So there's something to the development of the brain and the identity and the music that you're exposed to at that time that stays with you through life. And that openness of the mind won't really be like that ever again throughout your lifetime.
Okay. Two things in my mind. One, I'll ask first, and then I'll go for second. So recently, I listened to these songs from Coke Studio, and that was a set of songs which worked for me after a very long time, like after a really long time. And I agree with you when you say you are receptive or open-minded about music during a certain age bracket and all of that. But what I would want to understand is that how come so many songs never worked for such a long time, and this set of songs did? So was it something that like you've heard Pasuri? So how would you look at Pasuri, and how would you identify it?
So the thing is that yes, what I've said is true. Therefore, the songs that get through to everyone at these different ages, in other words, your mind is set, okay, these are the only songs I like. I grew up with this. This is what's familiar. This is what I identify with. This is what feels good, right? And then I hear other things, new things. And I say, oh, I don't like it. It's pop. I don't like the techno sound. I don't like today's hip hop. I don't like how the hi-hat is, how the kick is. It doesn't sound right to me. It just doesn't sound like anything. And then you hear music, but you hear some music. For you, it's Coke Studio. For me, it's also Coke Studio and other things. Sometimes you hear something, you say, oh my God, this is really just that good. And it pulls you in, and you say, what is even going on here? The mix is delicious. The songs are so well composed. There's enough familiarity and enough surprise that it's exactly what you want, right? It keeps your mind engaged, and you want to go back to them again and again, right? For me, it's on my bicycle. That's where because I'm producing music all day long, I might listen to the same 2 bars of music for 8 hours. So I listen to new music when I'm riding my bicycle or if I'm at the gym. And I just disappear. I got my earbuds in and I'm gone. So I think that's when you ask how is that possible, I would say it's good songwriting. They're just good songs. It's just good music. So it went right to it bypassed all of that prejudice and goes right to the heart.
Like what you're saying is at the bottom of it, a good song is a good song, and it'll work. Did you listen to Coke Studio Bangla? They came up with first season of Coke Studio Bangla also.
Wow. No, I have got to check it out.
So
wow.
2 songs which really stayed with me from Coke Studio Bangla were one is called Prarthana, and the other is called Dokhino Hawa. So, so I really like these 2 songs. You should check out Coke Studio Bangla as well.
Definitely. And I checked out the link you sent last night with that band also.
Bayan, that's one of my favorite bands as well.
Brilliant. Loved it.
Final question, and then we'll wind this up. So I conduct these workshops in which I teach the teenagers the basics of storytelling and short story writing and all of that. And I always try to expose them to not just good writing but different forms of art, because I think that's how you get inspired to create your own original styles. Otherwise, if I keep telling them about good authors and good writing, they'll probably start copying that. And anyway, so I try to pick up pieces of music which I really like, and then I share with them, and then I talk about the song, the story the song was trying to tell and all of that. And I try my best to pick up examples which would not sound dated to them. So and one of the bands that I pick up is the Cranberries. So Linger and Animal Instinct are 2 songs which I would expose them to. Generally, some of the students do have music as a subject in school. So when it's simple guitar and the drums being played, it doesn't sound outdated to them, because that's just basic. Even today, if a bunch of kids are coming together with a band, this is what they're gonna be playing and trying their hands at. Recently, the last workshop that I did, I played Animal Instinct for them, and then I got all kinds of response. They were trying to understand what the video was trying to say, and what it made them feel, and all of that. One kid said, "Sir, it sounded so old-fashioned," and that was surprising for me, because I know that there are certain songs which will sound old-fashioned. Like if I pick up something by Backstreet Boys or Boyzone, I can understand someone telling me that it sounds old-fashioned. But I want to want you to help me understand why that kid would say that.
The mix on those Cranberries albums was very plain. It was fine. There was nothing wrong with it, but it's very plain. The guitar, the bass, the drums, how it was mixed, like, didn't have any magic. It just sounded like a band in a room. It was like very simple. Really, I think the Cranberries were about Dolores O'Riordan. I think that was her name, the singer. It was really about that voice, because the songs and the music was like, pretty basic rock band. So I think when this young person says to you, "Wow, sounds old-fashioned," because they are used to, when they hear the instrumentation, guitar, bass, drums, vocals, they're hearing it as how it's mixed and recorded, in 2022. And it is different. It hits different. It's louder. How things are mixed is you could almost do like a test. Like, okay, I'm gonna play you. You're gonna close your eyes. I'm gonna play you 2 seconds of a song, and you're gonna tell me what decade it's from, right? I think that you probably would do that with a lot of accuracy. And so what that tells you is that there's like, every decade has kind of a vibe, has kind of a way of recording the drums. Like the snare in the 80s had a particular reverb on it. There's immediate, as soon as you hear it, you're like, okay, that was recorded in the 80s, right? Bands from the 90s, regardless of the songwriting, the mix itself sounds like this versus how it sounds in the early 2000s and beyond.
Now, what I'm surprised to understand is that kids are so well tuned, one would need to have so much of an exposure to be able to identify something like that. And the kids are trained already like that.
Well, you've got the world in your hands here,
Yeah.
right? So, and I admire you, Rahul, for also for sharing that with them and getting them to listen and getting them to think in new ways. And you mentioned crate digging, and these algorithms are the enemy of crate digging, right? Because it just, you're never going to find something new. You're never going to have that experience, right? So how do you become exposed to new music? How do you find music that is new to you, but that is old? Like when I was a kid, my best friend was a little older. I grew up in the 90s, but he turned me on to Bob Dylan, who obviously, those songs, those albums are from the 60s. And I felt like I found a gold mine when he would, and then we'd go to these thrift stores and we'd, occasionally you'd find a cassette tape of, and there was no internet. I had no idea how many albums Bob Dylan had made. So when I would find an album and I would be able to afford it, might be like $3 or $4 for a cassette, whereas a CD was $20. So as a kid, it was like, I could go into a thrift store and maybe find a cassette. And then, my point is, it was, although it was old music, it was new to me. It was a discovery, that I was digging in. And even today, I listen to things from the 90s that I wasn't so into then. Like I might listen to Wu-Tang Clan, the hip hop group from New York that was popular in the 90s. They were, of course, I grew up at that time and I knew the sound and I would hear it here and there, but I didn't really dig into it, But now I'm going back and I'm thinking, why do I need to listen to today's music when I can go back into the 90s and listen to everything that was made for me? That was my time, right? And I want to dig in and get all of those things I missed out on then.
I was
But
just
that's just me. I don't know. I'm just saying that's just me. That's just like how I might crate dig, so to speak.
I think, no, from what I understand, what you're saying is that, so there's a time when you want to create your library of music, and after one point of time, you're like, okay, this is good, But interestingly, I was just going through my record collection the other day, and then I realized that I don't have anything by Michael Jackson. No Michael Jackson record, no Michael Jackson CD. How can that be? Because I only have the cassette tapes, and so I ordered Thriller and I ordered Dangerous, and then I sat down and I listened to both the albums, Thriller on the vinyl and Dangerous on CD. It was so thrilling to listen to Thriller because the things that they have put together, and the way they have, probably experimented, and there's so much happening there. But when I sat down and started listening to Dangerous, it was just this one beat in every song over and over again, and I was so disappointed. And as a kid, I remember, crazy listening to Black and White or Black or White, or crazy listening to Dangerous and all those other songs. But now they sounded so flat. I was kind of disappointed for not being happy to listen to it again.
Right. It didn't give you the same joy and the same experience.
That Thriller did.
Yeah, right. Well, it goes to show you the mind, right? Because the thing is the same, but the mind has changed.
Yeah.
And your taste has changed, right? Even I used to listen to heavy stuff as a kid. I can't listen to it now. Or if I listen to it now, it's just like a couple of songs and then I have to turn it off, because the quality of the mind has developed a little bit. Thriller was a masterpiece also. That was Quincy Jones, and that was Thriller is the only song really in pop culture that is essentially a Halloween song. It's essentially a spooky pop song that has no peer. There's no other song that it's a peerless kind of, there's no other song like that we can listen to all year round that transcends culture. But that is essentially, based on turning into a werewolf. Like, what is it even about when you really think about it, right? And so somehow they made it's just a masterpiece.
Yeah. The video, the song, everything.
Everything. It was a total game changer. Even my girlfriend just recently did a flash mob she's a school music teacher. And so she had all the music teachers in the morning do a flash mob dance to Thriller. So she taught all of her teacher friends the dance, and yeah, and it was around Halloween. So they did it for the kids, and the kids weren't expecting it. And what was so interesting is that a lot of these kids didn't know the reference. They didn't know the song.
Yeah.
And there's no more central place is basically it. There used to be, Thriller was the time when all of us had our attention on the same place. It was MTV, it was the radio, and we all looked at this one thing, and it changed the game. It happened, it Smells Like Teen Spirit. It happens with, occasionally a song comes along and everyone watches the same place and the whole culture is transformed at once. Now there's so many platforms, there's so many places to put your attention, that things are happening over here that the rest of the culture doesn't know about. It's like, oh, did you see the thing happen on Instagram? No, because I wasn't looking at that, right? Or there's something that happens over here on TikTok, and this person's not on TikTok. So there's a lot of feeling of being left out and missing out on these things that are transformative. But what we lose is that cohesive experience where we're all transformed by this thing together.
You mentioned Ed Sheeran a while back, Janpriyan, and I remember Shape of You. And if I try to, pick up a recent example of a song which kind of like, everyone listened to, that's probably the most recent song that I can think of. Do you think, I don't know, I'm talking about North India, I would say.
Yeah, sure.
So did it happen in the rest of the world as well, that one song really?
Well, for me, I don't know what's happening locally, but for me, it's like Instagram and YouTube, and I see all the covers and everything of it. The Shape of You, I'll share a link with you at some point if I can find it. This guy at the record label, top of the record label, he was explaining the data of pop music over the years, and essentially saying that what sells is when you write songs for women during drive time. So this is just the data. It's not about opinions. It's not about anything else. So in other words, if you write a song where you're saying, think about what he's saying. I'm in love with the shape of you. Okay. Couldn't say anything better to a woman, right? She's hearing, oh, he's in love with my, it's like, it's kind of a no-brainer, right? Whether the song is from the perspective of the woman or from the perspective of the man to the woman, when it's really about her and something she can listen to as she's driving home from work, it's drive time. That the data shows that's where it's getting played the most, getting consumed the most. That's also where she psychologically she's with herself in that moment. She's not at work and she's not at home, right? And so she can be anyone in the car, right? As we can all be. And so that's the psychology of when you write a song for that psychology, that has market value.
And I have a feeling this would apply on films and on novels and a lot of other things as well. So that's a good piece of information that probably I can also use for my work.
Yeah, maybe, but Shape of You just really, it was the right formula. It's the right groove. I think we talked about in Pasuri. It's actually the same groove as Pasuri in a way. The groove is called a reggaeton. And in Shape of You, it's implied. It's not bum 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 bum. It's still implied that it's also it's there in Pasuri. It's a very sexy groove.
I think
That's
how I identified the song. It was catchy for me, that's what worked for me. It was just
winning formula.
Yeah. All right. Okay, Janpriyan, I think we should end our conversation here, and let's pick up a few more songs, and we'll talk about those as well. And
Definitely.
thank you so much for taking time out and doing this. And we definitely will be doing more of this. And I want you to tell us more about the song that's coming out like this week that you mentioned before.
I'll mention briefly, I have a song, Hari Hari, Hindi original. The singer who I feature is Neha Karode. She's based in Mumbai. She wrote the lyrics, she sang, and the song comes out this Friday. But moreover, the video, actually talking about the 90s, the video was directed by Mark Kaur. So on my YouTube channel this Friday, Hari Hari releases. The video is Mark Kaur. He's the guy who did Gwen Stefani's Just a Girl.
Oh,
He directed all of Green Day's videos. He directed Alanis Morissette, Tori Amos, Primus, Cake, Rancid, Shakira. He directed all of those videos in the 90s. His name is Mark, and he is a wonderful, brilliant artist and a good friend. And he directed this video for me. It features a dancer who is like telling the story of her kind of transformation with her love interest. She has a crush, and she's kind of playing tug of war with her own emotion, and it takes her on this kind of funny path, and inadvertently her relationship with this tug of war that she's feeling kind of causes all this kind of chaos for me. And I play different roles throughout the video. It's kind of like it's like a rom-com actually set to in a song. And so I'm really, really happy with this one. And so I hope that it speaks to the hearts of my listeners everywhere.
I'm sure it's going to do, and I'm so looking forward to it.
You'll love it.
So it's Friday is what I'm waiting for.
This
now.
Friday is coming out. Yeah. So on Instagram, I'm talking about it all the time, and you can share the link later. And
So it's Thursday already. So it's probably like just
tomorrow for you.
a day away. Yeah. All right. Okay, Janpriyan, thank you so much. And
thanks again, Rahul. I appreciate it, brother. We'll
thank you so
do
much.
more.
See you soon. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.